really excited for today's roundtable event as part of the public talk series, which I'll get into in a little bit, and also in partnership with the XX Project. The XX Project is an organization that helps women propel to the next phase of their personal and professional success. So props to them for helping us curate this event. Public Talks is the event series by public.com. Public.com is a social investing app. So we make it possible to buy fractional shares of the companies you believe in and share your ideas within a community of investors. And so today's talk is really going to focus, though, on the step before investing. So at Public, we talk a lot about investing in particular, but there's a foundation of personal finance that is kind of needed to be set before you kind of get to that step. And it's super important to kind of understand those fundamentals. So today I'm really pumped. We have two experts here, and we're going to talk through kind of how to lay that groundwork. My name is Katie. I'm the VP of Marketing at Public, so I'll be moderating. Our two panelists are Shay Curtin. Shay is a financial advisor, sports and entertainment associate at Morgan Stanley, and Angela Meadows, who is a vice president and senior relationship manager at Bank of America. So hey guys, how are you guys doing?
Doing well. Doing well, Katie.
Thanks so much for joining us today. I think we have a great group of people here, and they're really eager to learn from you all. So before we dive into kind of the topics that we had prepared, just curious, a lot of people, we just did a survey of our members, and we noticed one of the trends was that women said they learned about some of these personal finance and investing basics later on than the males who took the survey. And I'm just curious from your vantage points, how you first became interested into, personal finance and the financial markets, and tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are today so we can get to know you a little bit better. Do you want to kick off, Angie?
Sure. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I don't know if you're on the West or the East, but it's early here on the West. But I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone. So, Katie, to your question, I actually became interested in finance at a young age. I'm in California, and in the school I went to, 8th grade, we had something called the Back East trip. And so we would go to the 13 colonies, every class. At 8th grade, would go to the 13 colonies and just visit back east. When we visited, the day that we visited Wall Street is the day that I decided that I wanted to be in finance. I'd never changed my mind. We got to, number one, the just awestruckness of walking down Wall Street, but we also got to go into the New York Stock Exchange and all that hustle and bustle and just the energy and the excitement and just making money. I never veered off of my interest in just finance from that day. And so I went to school, went to college, majored in business administration, management, also took a lot of classes in finance, and just really never kind of changed since then. So that's how I kind of got started.
That's awesome. So it was a direct experience and exposure to that world, and you just caught the bug.
Yes, still have it.
That's awesome. How about you, Shay?
I would say my early on in life, first experience really to the world of finance and money in general was my father. He worked on Wall Street, and I never really knew what he did. I was a young kid. I thought it was something complicated, I'm sure. And I remember he would always come home from work and he smelled like money. And I realized as I got older, it wasn't the smell of money, it was the smell of his leather briefcase. But I was just always, a daddy's girl, and we were super close, and I was a tomboy, and I wanted to play all the sports that, my dad was into and that type of thing. And, I would say certainly from my father. And then as I got older, I realized, what it was like to earn money. And I got, jobs when I was super young, and then I got 2 jobs, and I wanted to just make as much money as I could because I loved the freedom that it provided me with. And so my passion was always, helping people, but I wanted to be able to make money while I helped people. And so that's how I found myself in the financial services industry.
That's awesome. So like for both of you, it was kind of getting that direct experience. And then, from there you were you were kind of on the path. I think that's a really interesting point because a lot of people are kind of outside of that and don't have that direct experience. And it's hard for them to kind of feel that energy and excitement because they feel like it's something that's inaccessible to them or something that's not for them. And so I think one of the big topics we wanted to talk about was just this notion of paralysis. When you look around and you hearing these concepts, you understand that personal finance is important, but you just don't even know where to start. So curious, like how you guys, encourage people to think about their finances and their financial future without feeling that overwhelm and paralysis. And like, what are some tips for just getting started? Angie, do you want to start there?
Yeah, I always talk about and encourage others in thinking about your financial future as the biggest, possibly the most important investment that you'll make in yourself and your family. And it just kind of sitting down, making a plan so you don't feel overwhelmed, or if you do feel overwhelmed, really assessing those components of your financial kind of plan and your financial situation that you find yourself in right now, tackling those items, those things that are making you feel overwhelmed, whether that be budgeting or paying down debt, really sitting down and making a plan on how you can tackle whatever is giving you anxiety. But
Yeah.
definitely focus on it because it's the biggest investment that you can make in yourself.
I love that tip of just breaking it into smaller, more manageable chunks, because I think it's, when you think about it holistically and you haven't started, you're like, whoa, I have student loan debt here. I got credit card debt. I should be saving for my retirement. It all kind of jumbles into one thing.
Right.
But your point, kind of like going one by one and breaking it down, I think that could help a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Shay? What's some advice for people so they don't get paralyzed before they get started?
I agree with Angie. You have to just take it in small doses at first. And like anything that you're not familiar with and you either want to learn more about because it excites you, or you need to learn more about because it's important for your overall well-being, you've got to jump into it and be ambitious and take the initiative to start doing your own research. And you're not going to become a financial expert overnight, but certainly we're in an incredible environment where we've got so many resources and access at our fingertips. We've got to really start to utilize them. And even if it's just an hour a week that you focus on just purely finances and digging into the world of financial literacy and beginning basics, 101 finance, budgeting and saving, and then build from there to perhaps, investing and that type of thing. But you've got to take the initiative to invest in yourself the same way that you invest in your mental health, your emotional health. Financial wellness is up there as well.
Yeah, I love that advice of being proactive and not reactive. I think when we asked our community kind of how they learned about personal finance and investing, most of them said they were self-taught, and it is just not something that's normally taught. Maybe you were fortunate and you had a parent or a family member or whatnot, but most people, it's exactly like you say, it's self-initiated learning, and kind of taking that proactive step seems like just taking that step is important.
Right.
The first step is the most important, like everything.
Yeah. So let's break it down to kind of one of the first things we think about when we talk about personal finance, which is budgeting. I remember early on in life, somebody told me that money coming in is the same as money going out. And so if you can do a little better on this side, you feel the impact as if you were making more money. And that kind of changed my worldview. So in your opinion, and Shay, I'll let you start with this one. Why is budgeting so important? And what are some good tips for beginners as they're kind of setting a budget and setting a plan for their spending?
Well, your budget is really the foundation of your financial plan. And, budgeting, it may sound like a super dreadful word. I meet with clients, especially, first time meetings or even clients who are, limited in their fixed income, if they're retirement and they've got to, abide by a budget. Everyone gets anxiety and wants to just reject the word altogether. But it's, you know, like anything, it's what you make of it, and you've got to embrace it. And overall, your relationship with money, you've got to embrace it. So your budget is the foundation, and what it is really just knowing with a pen and paper, preferably, what your expenses are, fixed expenses, variable expenses, relative to what type of money or income you have coming in. If you combine the two, and at the end of the day, you either have more money coming in, then you've got a surplus. If you combine the two and you're in a negative number, you've got more expenses and overhead than money coming in, you're in a deficit. And just realizing that black and white basic math right there is really going to be your foundation of what do I need to do now to address this and change it. And that's when you put together a plan. So you've got goals. Certainly your first goal is to get out of the budget deficit. You want to have more money coming in than you have going out, and really refine what you're spending your money on, as well as see if there's a way to increase what your money coming in is.
Yeah, in your experience, do you find it's common that people tend to underestimate what they're spending, and are there areas where they're underestimating more?
Yes, people don't like to, well, as I mentioned, people don't like to budget. They don't like to be, feeling restricted about what their spending habits are. And then putting your spending habits under a microscope, people get even more anxiety about that, I think. And, I think oftentimes people don't realize how much money they're spending. And, how did I just go to the grocery store and spend that much money? How did I go out to dinner and spend that much money? How did I go shopping and spend that much money? More often than not, people don't realize how much money they're spending. And again, that's where you have to start. Focused on the fixed expenses first. So no matter what, your rent or your mortgage is going to be a certain amount of money. No matter what if you have student debt, no matter what, your college expense for tuition repayment is a certain fixed expense. Your automobile, insurance, communication, usually those are fixed expenses. Utilities, more or less, fixed expenses. Then from there you go into what are the variable expenses. But you've got to really look under the microscope what every dollar is coming in and going out.
Yeah, it seems like half the battle is just being accountable for the tracking, and then the other half is actually doing something about it.
Sure.
Andrew, how about you? Do you have any kind of advice or tips for budgeting, or what are some of the best practices you would espouse to your clients?
Yeah, it's number one, realizing how important it is. Budgeting, just to piggyback off of what Shay was just saying, it ensures that you have the money that you need for, situations that arise, emergencies. You want to make sure that you're putting some funds away if an emergency kind of comes up. It also ensures that you'll have money for things that you want in the future. If you kind of have some forethought into planning for maybe those luxury items that you want to purchase, as opposed to just spending, then you'll be able to stay on track and make sure that you have, the money that you need when real issues arise. I like the idea that someone just put in the chat that they like to put money in certain buckets. I do the same thing. So for example, I have, different accounts for different things, like car expenses. If an unruly, situation arises that I need, like something with my transmission, or, something unforeseen, I have a bucket already of money set aside, so I've budgeted for it. Or if I, not this year, because no one's going on vacation this year, but if I wanted to go on vacation next year and travel somewhere, maybe out of the country, I've already budgeted for it. So you can still enjoy, the things that you like if you plan ahead and you put money aside out of your, regular income for different things that, might be coming up in the future.
Absolutely. And again, your savings, it has to be as automated as possible. The rule of thumb is typically 10% of your monthly check needs to go towards your savings. And you look at your savings almost as an expense account, and preferably keep it in a totally separate account, a savings account, so you can get a little bit of interest on it. But your savings is really going to be the most empowering thing that you can do for yourself when you start to budgeting, because you've got that cushion now, knowing that if, God forbid, there's an emergency, you're not going to miss a meal or have a full-on panic attack because you've got this little cushion. And again, rule of thumb, 10% of your salary, monthly salary, should go towards the savings. And the end goal before you can start going to perhaps more sophisticated investing is get at least 3 to 6 months amount of your total monthly expenses put to the side. And again, 3 is on the
low side.
It's a good place to start, but 6 months is really the rule of thumb of where your proper savings should be. And this is a great example of this environment and these times that we're living in, where everyone was just flying high a couple months ago and making money hand over fist. The economy is booming, and then it turns into a bit of a game of musical chairs. And when the music stops, did you have a chair? When the music stopped, did you have a cushion, a safety net of savings to really help you mitigate these really uncertain circumstances and times that we're living in now?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, taking control is the best way to kind of get ahead of some of those unexpected things. And I love the idea of thinking of savings as a fixed expense.
Sure.
And on the topic of just fixed expenses, we have a lot of college students on today. Hello to our friends from NYU and Columbia. A lot of you guys are on here. A lot of questions we get from this group is on this question of student loan debt versus other things, and how to think about, okay, you're coming out of college with some debt, might be a little, might be a lot. How should students approach managing these loans? Is it possible to do 2 things at once? So paying off your loans, chipping away at those, and also saving for retirement? And how should new graduates and college students think about that in terms of their, starting off their overall financial journey? Angie, do you want to kick that one off?
Yeah, I'll start with that because, whether it's student loans or just, a lot of debt in general, but especially student loans, I definitely think that you should look to try to refinance. There's this whole talk out there in refinancing your student loans. There's, especially now, very low interest rate kind of instruments that you can put your student loans into, under 2% right now. And so I would look at it as in regards to paying down your student loans and thinking about saving at the same time. You have to look at it as, do you have a plan? So you can sit down and really think about, okay, so, I've consolidated everything in a 1.9% interest rate loan, whatever the debt amount is. If I pay X amount every month, I can foresee, and that's taking into consideration interest, by 2 years, 3 years, however long it takes, I'll have this much paid off, given what my income is. If I can have a plan around that type of structured pay down and know exactly what day, what month, however many years from now that debt will go away, I can also work into the budget. That's what we talked about earlier. Something that I can carve out of my monthly income for savings. But if you don't have a plan around, how you're tackling your student loans, I wouldn't think about savings just yet. You really need to make sure that you're not paying too much in interest on your student loans. You've consolidated or refinanced it into something that's very low, because students are allowed to do that now, and then start thinking about, putting things away for savings. But first, I always say you need a plan. And then one other piece, I was reading an article the other day. There's loan forgiveness programs out there for students. Especially now, if you go to, I believe it's education.gov, look at the different programs out there for students that have excessive loans and see if you can qualify for loan forgiveness programs. So have a plan and then start thinking about savings is what I always encourage.
And not to get too deep in this topic, but at a high level, how would somebody know they're eligible to refinance, or where might they go for starting that exploration?
So I would encourage you, talk to your bank, talk to several banks. Look online. There's a lot of information online of cards. I hate to push credit cards or actual different types of loans that you can apply for as students. There's different qualifications, but do your research. Don't only just go to one institution, but go to several. Look online. I was actually just reading articles because I've been out of school for quite some time now, but reading articles and, the opportunities out there. I just learned about the Department of Education and their loan forgiveness program. So you just, college students, you just got out of college, you used to researching things, do your homework, ask around before you settle on, paying high interest rates. Try to negotiate for yourself the lowest interest rate possible in a loan that you can afford, and then go from there.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that, even the concept of refinancing, when I graduated college, I had loans. I had no idea that was a thing until after I had basically paid them off. And I think that's on me. I should have looked into that more. I think sometimes you just kind of accept oh, this is my reality.
Yeah.
And they don't understand
Don't do that. That's why it's great to have forums like this, because you talk about the different options out there. The more we talk about finances, and especially getting rid of debt early on before you really start your career, the better. So that's why I'm so glad that we can have discussions like this, and always try to research and advocate for yourself when it comes to your finances.
Yeah, and tell your friends, talk to your friends about this stuff. I mean, we talk to our friends about everything. I think just having these conversations, because someone might have, a nugget of wisdom and someone else might have another. And when you talk about this stuff, you can share ideas that way. Shay, anything to add on the topic of college students, how to think about loans and building their financial foundation after they graduate?
Yeah, certainly, refinancing the debt, and also, if you can't refinance perhaps some of that debt, look at paying off some of the privatized loans first that typically have the higher interest rates. The federal loans typically have the lower interest rates if refinancing isn't possible, and really chip away at building a system where automatically you're going to be paying off that debt, and where you become more comfortable in your income and you start to bring in more money, perhaps look at paying off some of that debt even sooner, so that you can then really start building your savings nest, as well as start looking into other perhaps investment vehicles down the line.
Awesome. So shifting gears a bit, I think we've been talking a lot about, being self-directed and proactive in taking control. And curious if you guys can share some resources. And I think this is different for everybody. I think about it as a financial literacy stack. And it's what are the things that work for you? But just to kind of help get some of the audience started, any sort of materials, resources, books that you guys would recommend just for getting started on some of these basics, where people can start there and then kind of build on their own from there? Shay, do you want to?
Sure, yeah. I think that, there's so many resources out there, and I like to get information from a lot of different resources. As a mindful thing, I want to, make sure when people are doing research on, personal finance or investing, being mindful of where you're getting this information from. Sometimes articles or blogs are sponsored by certain investment firms or, investment institutions or companies that have an angle. So when you do start doing your own research, just to get, working knowledge of money, and also, the current economic environment, those types of things, make sure they're legitimate, kind of mainstream perhaps resources. And then, you know, I always keep a couple of apps on my phone the same way, you know, if you're interested in something, you know, fashion, photography, whatever, you're going to have apps on your phone that you go to, whether you're like mindlessly scrolling or, you know, if you have some downtime, you know, download some of these apps, Bloomberg, CNBC, so you can get a working knowledge of what's going on overall in the world when it comes to money and monetary policy and that type of thing. And then also there's different types of apps for saving, just lots of podcasts. My favorite app for budgeting and saving is called Empower. My favorite podcasts, I have a couple, Optimal Finance Daily. It's a 10-minute daily blog that's going to give you a daily podcast that's just going to shoot out some of the top headlines. They keep it on like just on the surface, give you overall working knowledge of what's going on daily. There's a podcast from Glamour magazine called She's Making Money Moves or something like that. That's another good one. And then also, I think, you know, as I mentioned earlier, financial wellness is just important as, you know, your mental, emotional, physical wellness. And, you know, a lot of our monetary issues can stem from, you know, when we're young and, you know, the type of environment that we were raised in. And perhaps we were raised in an environment where, you know, we saw a good positive example of money management. And sometimes people are raised in an environment and surrounding where, you know, they've seen people with poor habits and they've, you know, seen, you know, poor money habits. And I think it's up to us now, especially with the resources that we have, to get more mindful about money and realize that there's things such as, you know, financial trauma, and take stock in that, and, you know, look back and see what has your environment with money been like since your childhood, and if need be, you know, assess that and look at money from like a really like your energy and your attitude and your disposition towards money. How does money make you feel talking about it, thinking about it? Do you feel anxious about it? Do you feel overwhelmed? You know, that's the type of energy you're going to, you know, have that relationship with money. You've got to, you know, try and take a step back and see if you can change the way you're looking at your relationship with money. My girlfriend, Leah Bernard, has a podcast. It's called Soul Care Sessions. And she's hosting a money mindfulness podcast next week. And it's going to be on financial trauma healing, because it's something that's very real. And again, if we're investing our efforts and energy into healing our mind, body, and soul, you know, money is a part of that. And we've got to get a healthier relationship with money.
Super interesting. I heard a talk lately that kind of hit on those points. That was essentially like, people have different emotional relationships with money based on how their family experience was like as a child. And, you know, some people see money as safety and security. Some people see it as status. Other people see it as like freedom, like you mentioned, Shay. So I think understanding like where you fall will help you understand kind of your own biases and your own relationship that you can apply to your plan, because it is different for a lot of people.
Sure.
Angie, any resources or tools or anything you want to share for people getting started to build their kind of their literacy stack?
Yes, and definitely I'm a proponent of the apps, especially because we spend so much time on our phone. There's also your online banking app, whatever that is, has a lot of tools built within it. So I would look at, you know, just your regular, whoever you bank with, your online banking app. But I'm a huge proponent of, there's a book, one of my favorite authors when it comes to financial literacy, and her name is Beth Kobliner. And she wrote a book. It's been several weeks at the top of the New York Times bestseller list, and it's called Get a Financial Life. And it really hones in. It's really easy to read. It's a page turner, but it talks about getting out of debt, strategy. She gives actionable steps that you can take, which is one thing that I love, that are realistic steps. So steps on getting out of debt, steps on boosting, your credit score, the importance of credit. She has a chapter on staying out of pitfalls, not making financial mistakes early on, once you start kind of planning your whole financial future. And then one of the things I love that she talks about is navigating your personal finances no matter what the economic situation is. So we know when it's a good kind of economy, there's different tools that you can use to maximize whatever savings you have. But when it's a bad, kind of unstable economy like the one we're experiencing, what's your strategy on also trying to save? So it's really a great book. And, no matter where you are in your, personal financial journey, there's something that you can glean from. And I think she has several books, but that's her most recent. And so again, it's called Get a Financial Life. I really recommend.
Also, really quick, one last thing. If you have friends or friends of friends or people like Angie and I who have access to more resources than we even know what to do with, don't be shy. Don't hesitate to reach out and ask for help, for a budget template. Or my firm, Morgan Stanley, does a ton of things for, women and financial literacy. And we've got a, 300-page women and money playbook that talks about everything from, negotiating your salary or raising money for your, first company, or, what are the expenses of having a kid, buying a first home, intro to investing. There's just so many resources. And I invite everybody on this panel to reach out to me individually. I'll pass off that playbook. But there's so many resources out there, and take advantage of people you come across as resources as well. Lean on them.
Yeah,
Great.
Totally. I think, the big things, like, it seems like cross-reference. So I just find that a lot. I'll find an article and then I'll read another article, because it's kind of like reading the news. You want to kind of just get as many perspectives as possible and get the full kind of scoop.
Sure.
And the second, hit up your friends, talk to your friends about this stuff. I mean, women, I've read studies that women are less likely to talk about money with their friends, and you're just missing out on this crossover of information that you would otherwise get. So definitely do that. Specific to, the topic of women and money, which is obviously the subject of this series. The next few questions are specific to kind of money issues that women in particular uniquely encounter as they kind of mature through their lives. And so I want to ask you guys, what are some tips you would share with a young woman in her 20s, into her late 20s, as she's kind of coming up in her career? Maybe in her personal life, she has gotten married or she's starting a family. What does that kind of evolution look like and mean? And how could it kind of change the way she's planning her personal finances as she's kind of going from the one phase to the next? Shay,
I would definitely say, Katie, that make sure that you have your future self, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the line in mind. I posted something. I like to post little financial nuggets when I see them. And I read something that said, every dollar you save in your 20s is going to be worth $7 in retirement. Right? So we really need to start thinking more about compounding interest and like what that means 10, 20, 30 years down the road. You'd be surprised on what just a dollar will, kind of compound into 10, 20 years. And so if you want to put aside $10,000 a year, what will that be in 10, 20, 30 years? So there's that, start saving early. We talked about carving out savings as part of your budget. But then I just saw too, and it's to your question, Katie, one of the people online just said, what about as you transition into maybe getting married or starting a family, what does that look like? And so I would just encourage, because a lot of my clients I see, some of the issues that arise when in your 30s and 40s are because you didn't talk about what your financial future looks like with whoever, your significant other, right? At the beginning. So because you didn't have you didn't come to an agreement on, how you're going to spend, how you're going to budget, what you're going to spend your money on, that causes problems down the road. So to that person that just posed the question, how do you approach finances as you get engaged and as you get married? You really need to talk about everything, coming into agreement with big purchases, who's actually going to be paying the bills, who's actually going to be monitoring what's coming in, what's going out. Like all of that needs to be hashed out, I would say, from the beginning. They need to hold each other accountable, maybe even write it down and say, well, this is what we agreed on. If we're going to change what we agreed on, let's, come together and agree that we're going to change kind of what our financial future is going to look like. Because, we always see and we always say that one of the biggest problems to relationships or marriage when you come together is finance. So really sitting down and having that conversation first and really coming into agreement on, what things are going to look like, what your goals are jointly, maybe what your goals are separately. Are you going to have separate accounts? Are you going to have joint accounts? All of that, anything and everything under the sun that you can think of to talk about up front before you sign on the dotted line or before you, jump the broom or whatever you want to call it. Make sure that those conversations are had. That's what I would encourage.
I think that's a great tip, that upfront conversation, because I think sometimes we get into the moment of conversations and you get deep into the context. You're talking about one thing, and it seems like from the jump, it could be, it seemed like an awkward or, it's not something, money's not top of mind when you're thinking about marriage or partnership, but like it's so important down the line. So just getting that out there and reporting it, I think that's a good tip. Shay, anything to add?
Oh, Angie nailed it. As a financial advisor, I sit with many husbands and wives, and it can get awkward. Even for people who've been married, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, that they still, very different pages when it comes to money. Also, I definitely recommend the woman to be equally involved and actively involved with the money-making decisions, with the budgeting, with the savings, and then certainly the investment plan and, what their, short-term, long-term, midterm goals are. Make sure you're on the same page and make sure you're actively participating in it and really invested in it because women usually outlive men. And so I've had instances where, the male will pass away and the woman, widow, doesn't even know how to write a check, doesn't know how to write a check from her checkbook. Or in the case of divorces, I have had, divorcee clients who, they don't even open their financial statements when it comes in the mail because I don't even know what to look at. So, definitely get involved. And as far as women and money and that bigger conversation that you mentioned earlier, Katie, definitely start talking about money more often with your friends. It's not such a hush-hush, passe thing to do anymore to talk about money. One of my best friends, I met her, a couple of years ago, and everybody wanted to, sit down at this dinner table. She's a celebrity type, and they just wanted to, be cool and rub shoulders with her and talk about the next party we were going to and hobnobbing and whatnot. And she sat down next to me. We started talking about money, and we became really close that night. The first time we hung out was I actually brought her to a CPA office, and we started talking about taxes and then investments, and we still talk about money all the time and what are our goals and what's going on in the financial world. And really it's empowering to talk about money with each other, because when we're hush-hush about it and we're uncomfortable about it, when the time to really step up to the plate and talk about money comes, when we're in, negotiating for a salary or a raise or, looking for a new job. We're not used to talking about money, so we feel uncomfortable about it and get, clammed up. So the more you get comfortable talking about money, again, you could learn different tips and tricks from your girlfriends, what's working for them. That's my recommendation for sure.
I love that anecdote because I think just the culture of money is changing so much. Even since, you know, when I was in college, it was like a decade ago, like this stuff was not cool. Like I would never have back then talked about it with my friends. And now, you know, Public's working with the Columbia Women's Business Society. There's other really amazing organizations of young women, and they're like, this stuff is cool. And they realize like, it's cool to be good at money. It's cool to understand business. And I feel like that's even been a shift in the last, you know, few years. And I love seeing it because it's just more ingrained in the culture of being a young woman that you're you know, business leaders now that look like you, and you can kind of relate more because it just wasn't always that way.
It's so empowering though. It is so empowering to be able to speak confidently about money, and that empowerment that you have is contagious, and it'll help empower your girlfriends, I think, or family members, or whomever.
Yeah. So I have a couple more questions for you guys, and then we have some time at the end. So if you guys have questions, drop them in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll pick them out from there. But kind of back on the subject of just navigating, you know, finances as a woman, one of the issues that we talk about a lot is, you know, women being the CEO of the household. Women are making, I think, 2/3 of all, you know, spending decisions at the household level. And so in the context of like running and managing a household, are there any strategies or tips for someone who's at that phase or someone who's thinking about entering that phase? How is it different kind of managing finances for a household versus you personally? Either of you want to jump in?
Well, 50% of women are the primary breadwinners, and 50% of women typically are the ones that are making the financial decisions in the household. And as you mentioned, we're making less money, we're living longer, and our healthcare expenses are higher. So, you know, again, I hate to beat the dead horse, but you've got to start, you know, early, and you've got to be meticulous, and you've got to hold yourself accountable, whether it's keeping a spreadsheet or pen and paper. You know, rule of thumb, about 50% of the money that's coming into the home needs to go to your necessities. About 30% is going to be towards your wants, and discretionary things, eating out, that type of thing. And at least 20% now start putting that towards your savings and your financial goals. So maybe the rule of thumb is 10% if it's just you and you're single, but if you've got a household of other individuals, you've got to boost that savings up to 20% because now you're responsible for more people.
Yeah. Anything to add there, Angie?
100% agree. You know, and the discipline really starts with, you know, when you have it's just personal finances, right? And so it's kind of like, you know, once you master that, and it's important to master that, the responsibility and the budget that you're working with, hopefully the finances that you're working with, the expenses that, you know, you're working with as you transition into a household, it just gets bigger. So establishing that foundation when it's just you is so important. And then those things and those skill sets that you learn, you know, when you're just kind of budgeting for yourself, transitions into, you know, budgeting for a household, you know, your mortgage, if you have kids, you know, they're going to private school, all of that, all of the principles are still the same. It's just at a bigger scale. So if at all possible, try to learn that when you're single. And then, you know, you'll have the skill set and the tools that you've learned to manage a household. But to Shay's point as well, make sure that, you know, as females, you are responsible and you are aware and informed of what is going on in the household in terms of finances. I too have a lot of clients that if something happens to, you know, who the breadwinner is or whoever is handling the finances, and then the other party is not involved, they have no clue as to what to do. And a lot of times that's the female, right? So definitely be involved, be engaged, and be jointly responsible for everything coming in and going out of the household is very important.
Awesome. We have a lot of questions, and so I'm going to start grabbing as many as we can in the remaining time. Feel free to keep sending, and if we don't get to them, we'll have more events like this, and we'll make sure we get to you guys. I saw one of the questions that come in about somebody who's ready to partner with a financial advisor and curious how to find and vet someone that you can trust and ensure that that person is kind of has your best interests in mind and is the right fit. So any tips for someone who's at that phase, kind of how to pick a partner to manage their finances with?
Yeah, looking for a financial advisor, I would recommend certainly referrals. Speak to individuals that you're friends with or family members or in your business community who you trust and seem to have a decent financial plan and seem to be, doing well in managing money fairly well, and ask them if they can give you a referral, and then meet with at least a minimum of 3 different people and discuss openly and honestly what your investment goals and objectives are, short-term and long-term, and make sure this person aligns with you and can really identify and relate to you, and that they understand your value system as well. Your principles and beliefs actually play a really big part of your financial plan and your investment portfolio. So certainly look for referrals and meet with more than 3. 3 at least.
That makes sense.
I would say too, Katie, because oftentimes I do refer clients to our financial advisors, and I would say make sure that your goals are aligned, and kind of like initiatives that you believe in are something that they are investing your funds in. Sometimes when you pull your money into a big fund, there are companies and corporations or things in that fund that you don't agree with. So, make sure that you have conversations with, what your values are, what you want to support, and to make sure that your money is aligned with, what you want to invest in. And then also, I think it's important to sit down with them and make sure that they're aware and helping you get to your target goal. So like if you have a specific 5-year, 3-year, 5-year, 10-year plan, make sure that they're aware of what that is. A lot of times I see people just give money and they say, just do with it what you do. But really, I would encourage, be more involved. Make sure that you're holding those advisors accountable for certain targets that, you're working towards. So it should very well be a collaborative effort, discussion, and checking in often with your advisor instead of just once a year.
Yeah, absolutely. And to piggyback what you said, again, aligning your value system with your investment strategy is important now more than ever. How are the companies that you're investing in reacting to things that are going on in the world? Are they furloughing, a lot of employees? How are they handling that? What are they doing for social, economic issues, racial injustices? Do they have diversity boards? Do they have, real systems in place that are environmentally, social governed? And again, also, when you're looking to work with a financial advisor, do some due diligence, have some common sense. Like, ladies, when we meet a guy, we're immediately going to, do our research, ask every girl we know if they know the tea. We're going to go to Google. We're going to Google 10 ways from Sunday. Take that type of initiative, with your financial advisor. Make sure that they're legitimate. Make sure they're not just some Bitcoin cryptocurrency Forex trader from Instagram, or, your college roommate's ex-boyfriend who's day trading on, Robinhood. Like, get a real financial advisor who's got skin on the line, who's, actually got licenses to really be able to legally give you information on how to invest your money. That's something I feel very passionate about.
Love that. Go Nancy Drew on your portfolio.
Yes.
I mean, it's an important point because I think you start, especially when you start work, you're like, you always, okay, I got to put money in my 401k. I'm going to set the target retirement, and you never peel back the layers. And, you know, if you don't believe in companies that use prison labor, or you don't want to invest in a gun manufacturer, like, you just don't know.
Yeah.
Someone asked a good question about balancing values and performance, and like, do you have to sacrifice performance because of your values? How do you guys think about that? Are you hurting yourself by being very principled as an investor, or can you have a high performing, you know, healthy portfolio and still feel good about where your money's going?
Sure. Investing in sustainable type of investments, you know, is a long-term approach to investing. But also, if you're going to be invested in the market and, you know, in equities and stocks, that's also a long-term investment strategy. And, you know, we've had a lot of research in the last 10 or 15 years about the ESG, environmental, social governance, values-based investing, and it's been able to show and demonstrate over time that it's not just a, you know, a pipe dream of what I could do in the best case scenario of the world. It's been shown that you can actually outperform the benchmarks and still be able to achieve those long-term goals while not sacrificing what's really important to you. And I think that's the most beautiful thing that's actually come out of some of the recent, you know, market volatility, is that those companies that are doing well by their investors, by their shareholders, by their employees, by the environment, they're not feeling the volatility quite as much as some of those companies that are showing, you know, lack of regard for some of those values. And so it's been really cool to be able to show this as an investment theory and not just, you know, a hopeful philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, there's even studies that show the more diverse a company is, the more innovative it is, and the more, you know, there's a lot of research on it.
And profitable because there's less sexual harassment suits. Yeah. You got more benefits. That's really real.
True.
Yeah. Okay, so popping into a couple other questions, we have a few minutes. One person asked, you know, they recently had to dip into their retirement savings in their 40s, so they're starting over. Is the approach similar when you're starting over in your 40s in terms of starting to build that nest again, or should they be approaching it differently now that they're in their 40s?
I'm going to turn that over to Shay, but I would say that I think the older you get, the less risky you want to be. So that is actually a real life scenario that a lot of people face, especially in this economy. But it's something that, you know, we have to address. Shay, would you agree? You're just being a bit less risky in your 40s.
Sure. Absolutely. But, you know, life happens, right? And so that's a part of having, you know, a good financial plan and working with a financial advisor, is that plan is nimble and flexible, because things in life happen that you cannot plan for. And so you've got to be able to, you know, react accordingly and adjust. So it's very common right now, individuals tapping into their retirement savings because there's not the penalties of 10% that there were before the recent CARES Act that passed. But keep in mind, you know, you're going to have to replenish that. But I'm very, you know, confident at the age of 40, you've got, you know, a unique skill set by now where you can, when the economy does start to recover, go back into that, perhaps into that world where you can do what you've developed skills for, and or you know, 40 is young, so you can still develop other skills and be able to get another perhaps source of income, and be flexible. You've got to be flexible, and you know, things happen. Diving into retirement at 40, it's not the worst thing, and thank God you had the ability to put some money towards savings, because what would you be doing otherwise now?
Yeah, love the takeaway of flexibility and being willing to kind of adapt based on your circumstances, because you can plan for, plan for the future. No one knows what's going to happen. So I'm seeing a lot of questions specific to investing. We're going to tackle that on another entire talk. So let's table those. But we have time probably for one more question. And somebody asked about somebody who's interested to be kind of on a similar path as you guys, Angie and Shay, of being like a professional in this industry. And they're curious about how you chose which specific path to take, whether your focus is on budgeting, personal finance, or on investing, and kind of how you thought about that and made that decision. I'm sure we have a lot of people on here who are interested in this, not just for their own finances, but as a career path. So any kind of insight in how you navigated that decision making?
Well, I actually just have a passion for commerce. I'm a commercial banker, so I work with corporations. I love, all things sales in terms of whatever your product is. I like the idea of, the blood, sweat, and tears that business owners have to put into their business to make it grow. But the success stories that I've seen over the years in, taking companies from 500,000, in sales to 50 million in sales, to me is just something that I'm very passionate about. However, I do also have to embrace the personal side of the business owner, because, once their business starts doing well, they're gaining and they're increasing on their personal wealth. So that's when I would pass the ball over to like a Shay to make sure that they are, doing what they need to do to make, for the generational wealth, to make sure that they're passing on a legacy to their family. But for me, I just love, I'm a generalist. So I work with all industries, have a focus, however, in apparel and beauty and fashion. Of course, I'm a girl, so, why wouldn't I love those things? But I just love all things business. But I do respect how difficult it is to work with individuals also in helping them grow personally.
Cool. Yeah, it's nice to get both perspectives from you guys.
Sure, and it's fascinating how Angie and I are both in totally, kind of opposite worlds of the finance spectrum. Oftentimes, the bankers don't really work super close with the financial advisors and investment institutions, but we have so much in common, and that is that the budget is really the basis and the backbone of everything. And, I didn't know that I wanted this to be my path in life, to become a financial advisor, but my passion was helping people, and I had an opportunity to do this and make money. And on that journey, I developed my own, financial plan and philosophy. And what type of financial advisor would I be if I'm giving advice to others on how to manage their life savings if my own financial affairs weren't in order? So certainly, living below my means for a sustained amount of time. I lived in a shoebox apartment for 11 years, up until just last year. I lived in a tiny shoebox and drove a car that had 170,000 miles on it. And up until I came to this firm, I was actually had 2 side jobs. I was cleaning houses on the side. No one knew that. And I had like a little eBay hustle store. And so I wanted to keep my expenses low and try to get as much, income coming in that I could, and save to get to where I needed to be and felt comfortable to then, gradually go to my 1 bedroom, which feels like a mansion to me, quite honestly. But my friend's like, why didn't you do this sooner? Or Shay, why don't you come on the girls' trips with us? Or that type of thing. And it's because it was important to me, to have that financial discipline, because I see where it would take you if you didn't, and I see where it could take you if you did.
Love that. Run yourself like you're a business.
Yeah.
Revenue streams, budgeting. Well, guys, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. I know you have a lot going on, and so I speak for myself, but I'm sure the entire audience, that this was so helpful and so many great things to take away. I'll be following up with, I wrote down a lot of the resources, so I'll share links out to those. And we hope to see everyone at the next roundtable to be announced. Stay safe and stay healthy, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Bye.
Bye.